So, today we're going to spend some time on a topic that it took me some time to wrap my head around, or rather to get out of my head about and more into my body, and actually trusting the evidence, the direct knowing, the direct experience that I got, and the changes that happened in my unconscious and in the program of the mind when I was practicing it. So often when we start the self mastery work, we're coming at it, and I've been talking about this before, with a feeling of struggle, because that's what we're starting. We already feel we're struggling with things internally. And so that's also kind of how we approach the self mastery practices themselves. So, and there's truth to it. It takes effort, it takes motivation, it takes willpower to shift both your perspective about your inner world and how everything works in there and how it's been created. And also, of course, to start making changes to it. You need some push, you need a motivation, you need some willpower. And especially if we're coming from that strong victim state about what is happening to us, both in our external world and the reactions that are going on inside of us. So, effort and struggle, they are just one aspect of life, though. It's not the one way, it's one perspective, one aspect. And neither your job, your relationship, or the life that you have, or your relationship to your unconscious has to be created from here, from struggle, from effort. And the more personal freedom you have, the more personal freedom that you take back from your unconscious automated program, well, then the better you can build your life the way that you actually want it. And I'm not talking about the domesticated way that your mind thinks you should be wanting to live your life, but the experience that you actually desire. So, in this session, I'll talk about how pleasure can be a great hack that will both build a new dream, move you out of that struggling and effort beliefs, and have unconscious structures that resists that way of approaching things, have them surface. So when they do, you can become aware of them and help them to shift. So connecting with pleasure will open you up to a more accepting and trusting relationship with your unconscious. And this in itself will have a major impact and lead to both faster and deeper change. So there are a few things too. That's why I'm calling it a hack, a bit of a linchpin. When working with pleasure, a lot of other dominoes will fall. So let's dive in a little deeper into this topic. So, some of our domestication, some of our programming around pleasure, or even just the word pleasure, is usually that one, it's purely sexual, and therefore it's bad or shameful or nothing that we should be allowing ourselves to feel. Or to others, it might still be mostly or purely sexual, but with that, it's been something that we've been kind of clinging to, that's been highly desirable and emphasized, and we've been a little fixated, attached to it, and wanting it and trying to get it. And for others, and it can also be a combination of this, but for others, it might be that, oh, pleasure is not practical, it's not necessary for survival, and therefore it's last on the priority list. It's something that you get to after a long day of labor, when you've truly deserved it. It's that glass of wine on your Saturday, or putting your feet up after a long day. So, but you can't get it unless you've earned it for some reason. So then it's often then connected with effort and struggle. So I want to call pleasure a bit of a rebel in terms of what we've been programmed. It's like a program disruptor. And it will likely bring up these hidden beliefs and resistance, which is the perfect scenario for your hunter, because your hunter wants this to come up to the surface so it can bring awareness to it, to these programs, and help them to shift. Starting to invite pleasure, though, won't just disrupt and have your old program surface. It will also connect you with your artist to create the life that you want for yourself. So I want to cover 3 major consequences that working on connecting with pleasure has, that I see happen when you connect with pleasure. So the first thing, number 1, is it automatically puts you in connection with receiving. It moves you out of a state where you're trying to get something, to do something. And in the meditation course, I call this the beta brainwave state. I refer to it, the stressful state where we're in survival, when we're in problem solving. And when you shift out of that and into receiving, it immediately shifts your brainwave state. So to feel pleasure, you need to actually tune yourself to receiving. Pleasure can be found in the simplest of things. Eating a ripe mango, the glitter of the sunlight on the snow, breathing, a hot shower. There's pleasure in all these things. There's pleasure in the experience of all these things. But pleasure is not something that we can kind of go after and try to grab and pull to us and try to push ourselves into, like, let's feel pleasure. We need to soften. We need to open ourselves to receive it. So when you connect with pleasure, you automatically open yourself up to receive more, which will have other impacts on old programs. So, like I said, there are most likely old beliefs based on struggle in your unconscious program. That you need to struggle in relationships, you need to struggle to earn your income, to get things done, to get what it is that you want. Those things won't just come to you. And also to make changes to your unconscious beliefs or to learn new things. They're all efforts and struggle. The thing is that all the struggling in itself keeps you from receiving what you want. It becomes a program in the way of opening up to receiving. So when you're operating from this program that says that you have to work hard, you have to go get it, and you keep putting your faith in that program by taking action from it, by acting from that belief. And this keeps you in this loop of struggling. When you're the artist of your life, on the other hand, and when you're moving into that and when you're practicing those skills, you create channels where the things that you're intending and the things that you want and the things that you have identified as your desires and your wantings from integrity, you open these channels where they can come to you. And you much more put yourself in a receiving mode to it. But if you're busy struggling and believing that this won't happen and you have to work hard for it, you'll most likely keep creating more of your old experience and you keep seeing evidence that this is true. So it's like it only came to me when I worked really hard, or I see that's how the world around me works. And you keep living in that box of that program because you're not able to dream outside of it. You haven't stepped out of that perspective. Because it's true, according to this program. So that's one thing that will happen when you connect with pleasure. It will automatically put you in touch with receiving much more than before. Because to experience pleasure, you need to open yourself up to receive it. And the other consequence or area that will shift and change and more dominoes to fall is that connecting with pleasure will put you in presence in your body and in the now, in this moment. We tend to live our lives as they will start soon. Like, this is just me getting ready for a real life that will start soon. I'm just practicing. But as soon as I got this thing figured out, as soon as I have the income that I want, as soon as I have the partner that I want, as soon as I get rid of this back pain that's bugging me, then that's when my real life will start happening. So again, also this happens a lot with the self-mastery work. Our mind has the tendency to think, well, when I've been able to shift that old mean judge, when I've been able to get rid of him, life will be so much better, so much easier. That's when I'll start living. That will be my time. And again, what we often don't recognize is that it's this voice, that I'll get there voice, I'll be there soon voice, and the beliefs behind it that keeps us distant from what we long for. Because the whole foundation of that voice is that you are separate from what you want. It keeps you separate from what you want. We're back to the Cinderella story that I told in the other, I think it was episode number 2, of you're there up in your tower and you're longing for the ball, but you're never at the ball. You're thinking about all the beautiful things that will happen once you are there. So what we want is always somewhere else, a little further down the road. It's just there. We're soon there. When you start observing this voice instead, when you start putting your attention on it from the observer, you'll find that it's just a program, like the others, with its own manufactured reality, with its own manufactured logic, and very little truth to it. It's again another box, another perspective that you can learn to dream outside of. When you start tap into pleasure and make it your mission to feel it more, you're making yourself available to this present moment. It's not about planning your pleasure for later. Like, I'm going to have a lot of pleasure later. Your mind might be saying that, but it's really about experiencing it in the now with each breath. So since we're here, let's just do that right here. If you want, you can close your eyes if you won't bump into anything. And just maybe experience the difference. Just feel into your breath, moving in and out through your body. And for a moment, you can go into that more go-getter, struggle, effort way of breathing. What would that feel like? I need to I need to make the breath happen. I'm the one in charge of the breath. I need to make it happen. Without me, it will not happen. So take a few breaths like that from that perspective. What is the experience in your body of that? And now, allow yourself to relax. Allow yourself to open, to soften, and instead tune into the quality of receiving your breath. Like it's a gift that is being given to you. It's almost like the first time that you experience it. You experience all the sensations that comes with it. Your ribs expanding, your lungs filling up, your belly moving, your chest moving. And it's also the pleasure in the knowing that it's bringing life to your whole body, to every cell of your body. How does it feel to tune into that experience of receiving your breath? And the pleasure in breathing. The pleasure in your body fulfilling this need, this desire for the oxygen, for life. And just check in with yourself and see if you feel a little more in touch with this present moment right now. There might still have been some chatter going on, some parallel thoughts and other things, but compared to the have to get something done, just feel into what this experience is in your body of receiving, tuning into the pleasure of your breath. So it's about experiencing the pleasure in the now, huh? And you pause from living in a projected future with all the things that needs to get done, and or memories of all the past experiences and situations. And with opening yourself to pleasure, you instead allow yourself to receive your life the way it is right now without having to change it. Can you sense the shift out of rejection in taking that action, in tuning in to pleasure? You step out of rejection. You step into allowance and acceptance and even appreciation. And this brings me to my third point, my last point about this, that connecting with pleasure takes your acceptance practice to a whole new level. It's like infusing your acceptance practice. Once you've started connecting with pleasure in more simple ways, in more given ways, like enjoying the smell of flowers or the fresh cup of coffee or the sound of that V8 engine, whatever it is that, gets you going, you can start extending that experience of pleasure because now you've exercised the muscle. Now you are better at tuning into it. And now you can start extending that experience of pleasure into other things in your life. Because honestly, the more you shift out of your ego mind, the more pleasure you'll find in most everything. It's the mind that labels good or bad, comfortable, uncomfortable. We don't want this, we want that. But to life itself, creating and experiencing anything is full of pleasure, whatever it is. So even a dentist appointment, even the sting from a bee, or a wave, a tsunami of anger moving through your body can be experienced as pleasurable when you practice. And shifting your relationship to the events happening both inside and outside of you throughout your day in this way will have a major impact on your old patterns. They're used to be pushed down and not allowed. Oh, we shouldn't be here. Here's the anxiety. Here's the judge about the anxiety. Go away. We don't want you here. Don't show up right now. I don't want you to be here. They're used to be pushed down. Suddenly, you're saying, you're all welcome here. I enjoy feeling it all. I'm going to tap into the pleasure of feeling you, or even the pleasure that this part has in feeling that. And that pleasure has been not allowed. And the paradox here is that when you fully accept and embrace all the parts of you, they're also allowed to shift. Rejecting them is what keep them stuck in their old patterns. So they're allowed to shift because they've been heard and acknowledged instead of told that they're wrong, bad, and therefore they need to stay hidden. When you respond to your internal world, your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions with pleasure, with this kind of full-on acceptance, instead of contracting, shouldn't be here, fear, it will disrupt their whole world. You're no longer relating from that same identification with the mind that you did before, stepping into the judge and telling them to go away. So now you've opened the door for a lot of hidden parts to step out of their old role. You're opening up the field for them. They can shift that role. And in a way, it's like they're finding a completion. They're finding a fulfillment with their old patterns, and they can move on to new things. They can transform. But you can't fake this. It's not about putting on a mask of pleasure because it's the right thing to do, or because Eva told me to practice it, or Eva told me to feel it. I should be feeling pleasure. It's like, no, it's really about you learning the skills, practicing the skills, and it might take time to drop into your body and curiously begin to explore the sensations of pleasure in your body. Fully feel them and see where they are and what makes them stronger, and also notice what shows up as a resistance response with it. So, a little last note about what might show up. So, when you start shifting into a new dream that is very different from your old program, the stuff in the way, yeah, it will reveal itself. And this is where many people get lost when it comes to creating with intent or manifestations. When we set an intent to experience more pleasure, everything that you previously have avoided or labeled as uncomfortable, annoying, anything but pleasurable will most likely show up. It might feel like everything crappy is showing up and hitting you over the head again and again. Your anxiety might be back full blown. You lose your job. You have a major argument with your spouse. Whatever is that been holding a lot of fear for you. And this is not you failing, which your mind might be thinking and saying, because it's scared and is trying to protect you. Instead, this is you faced with the opportunity to clearly see where you lack pleasure because your mind has been judging or labeling certain events as something bad, disgusting, not wanted. And this is you being invited to embrace these parts and bring acceptance to them. They show up because they want to be seen, heard, accepted, acknowledged, and they haven't been previously. So, what I'm sharing with you to summarize is that connecting with pleasure is a major linchpin that will have other dominoes fall. Both in creating more of what you want and learn to navigate feeling that in your body and learn to navigate from the things that you want, things from integrity, the things that have you create your next phase, your next part of your life, but also in bringing your unconscious program to the surface. A bit of a rebel that way. A rebellious act of connecting with pleasure and bringing full on acceptance to the shadow part. Let's have a look in the chat here and see. So Karen is sharing, having a hedonist archetype, I have indulged in pleasure easily. I realize I have developed a belief from my yogic training in the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain is the cause of human suffering. Time for a new perspective on that. Yeah. There are certain more minimalist or ascetic, is that the word in English? Yeah. Ways of spiritual paths that kind of will deny that. And to me, it's more the attachment that is what becomes a problem. Yeah. It's the attachment to a certain outcome. It's this attachment, an entitlement to an experience of pleasure and it being connected, attached to certain events. It's like, I need this sugary dessert to experience pleasure. I need this glass of whiskey to experience pleasure. That's my only channel for pleasure. And with that, I agree to look at that program and see what happens when we start shifting it. If there's a clinging, if there's a, don't take this away from me. This is my candy. This is what I need. Otherwise, I won't be able to experience pleasure. But when we free ourselves from that or step out of that program, the clinging attachment to that certain way of getting pleasure, well, now the field is opening up, huh? We can experience pleasure in other things. So no, it's usually not the same thing as the old program's idea of pleasure and the attachment it has had to it. And Edward is also sharing, I'm noticing moving in and out of pleasure, which is helping me to move to where I'm happier. Yeah. So this is something that I often encourage you to do. It's not about seeking one static state. It's about being fluid in you moving in and out of them and recognizing the movement and recognizing that transition in and out. Like, where am I at now? And how does it feel when that shifts into a more open, pleasurable state where I'm tuned into receiving pleasure? Just like you described, Edward, like, okay, and what does it feel like when I shift out of pleasure and might be experiencing more stress or suffering or just something completely different, something between those two outposts? So yeah, that's a really good way of also training your neural pathways and creating new neural pathways by making the transition again and again, in and out. It's not about going there and holding on to it. Let's not lose it, because now we're often clinging and fall out of it too. Yeah, and Janine is also following up on what we talked about with the attachment to pleasure. Like, maybe craving pleasure is different from being able to enjoy pleasure in the present. Yeah. Yeah. The craving, the must have it, and must have it in a certain way, and that's the only way to have it, is very different from what I'm talking about, of instead connecting with it in each stroke of life, in each situation of life. So Aitana has a question here. I'm going to read it in full. I can connect with the power of pleasure in little things. Mind labels good and bad, and I'm aware with it, but still struggle to connect with the pleasure when I experience physical pain or back pain. I struggle to observe this intense pain, and meanwhile, a part of me wants to keep going with my to-do list. Another one wants to rest and says what you said at the beginning, I will start living again when this pain decreased. How could I apply the pleasure approach here? Thank you. So you're kind of going for the ninja move here, the master skill of connecting with pleasure in something that not just have been labeled it by the mind as something bad, but it's actually a purely limbic, survival instinct in our nervous system to react to pain in a fearful way, because that's what kept us alive. It's like, don't go be bitten by an animal. Like, no, stay away from that. Stay away from pain. So it's also important to understand that this is a function built in to our human animal. Like, it's there. We react to pain that way. So go shift that is probably not a 1 or even 5 session, of meditations and practicing with it. It's probably a longer layered process where you will come up against these different layers. Some of the programming that the mind has done about it, the labeling, the judging about it. Probably, my guess, because I'm moving through a lot of pain in my physical body, there is a fear of what it means to have the pain. There's often a lot of meaning brought in together with the pain. So It's not just the experience of the pain in the physical body, but it is like, what does it mean that we have this pain? Are we broken? Is there something that we won't be able to do? Is there something wrong with us? What's going to happen in the future? So investigating and inquire into these meanings that the mind has given having the experience of pain is probably going to be one of those layers. And like I mentioned, one of the other layers will most likely be your limbic brain responding to pain, your nervous system being like, we need to do something about this. So I don't have a quick answer to you of like, go do this and it will shift. But I would say explore and meet the layers. Because I often talk about this. If you've taken my meditation course or any of my other coaching, I talk about we go for what we want, and it's over here. It's over here in the distance somewhere, and then things show up. So for you, Aitana, in this case, is be like, oh, I'm going to sit and be with my back pain. And then a judgment about it shows up, or no, I need to get to my to-do list, or I'm just going to ignore this pain till it's better, and then I will feel better. And we tend to think that the things showing up are obstacles. And now we step into the identification with a different part of our mind that is judging what's showing up and like, being a little annoyed or irritated. I was trying to get to being with my back pain, and now you are showing up. What are you doing here? But actually, again, what you're invited to do, this is the path there. When you intend to sit with your back pain and these layers show up, I need to go distract. I just want it to go away. That is probably intimately connected with your back pain in some way. It's a structure that's been created that are working together. So I think what is showing up is actually you being present with your back pain. So see and notice if there are reaction to the things showing up, and see if you can shift, and instead of trying to have them go away, be present with that layer. Can you accept and love or move an inch closer in accepting and loving that layer, and at least observe it and see what it is about, and notice when you step into relating to it from a different part of their mind. It's a bit of a complex topic, which I love. I love the connection between the physical body and our unconscious mind and our stored emotions and what is going on there. So I'm pretty sure there'll be other sessions where we go into that topic a little deeper. Joannis is asking, in allowing all, including pleasurable thoughts and feelings, to express themselves unobstructed, one sees that goals, things don't get done. How do you work with this? For me, it was seeing that the one that sees that goals, things don't get done come from a belief, a perspective. It comes from a box. That's one side of it. And it's like, okay, it believes that that's what will happen. To get things done, if we just enjoy pleasurable things, that will never happen. And in part, it's a program. In another part, it can just also be evidence, kind of what Karen touched on earlier in her question. Well, I have a part that loves indulging in everything pleasurable and kind of avoid everything else. And that becomes like an addiction or a programmer in itself, where we're like, no, we just want this and nothing else. What I'm inviting you to do is, by practicing receiving pleasure without the attachment, without the program attachment of it, you'll also be able to bring pleasure into getting things done. So all of a sudden, you're approaching the tasks for the day, not so much from the effort point of view, but from a more playful, enjoying, pleasurable, accepting point of view. So there are some nuances to this, because it all depends on kind of a little bit what our program is, what our starting point is, and what we've been programmed with. But the mind tends to give it either or. If I have pleasure, I won't have anything of this. And if I have this, I can't have any of the pleasure. And it's the either or, the good or bad, the white or black, that we're opening up and saying, well, hold on. What happens if we take away those rules and actually experience? Can there be pleasure in cleaning the house? Because I clean the house not from a I have to perspective, but from a loving, nurturing, caring perspective. I want to take care of the space that I've been given. I want to honor it and keep it tidy to the level that I enjoy. And therefore, I will put my attention there. I will bring some effort into it. And there's an enjoyment, there's a pleasure in it. So that was a lot of my personal journey with this also, of seeing that my mind wanted to create an either or situation. And life as a core is not about that. Okay, so let's see. So I'm reading a little bit your comments here and seeing what we can get to, because some of the topics that we're moving into, they're pretty complex. Let's see what I can. And the ones that I can't get to here, I might copy them and put them in the post when I post the video, and then I can respond a little bit more there. So Janine is asking, if we can feel pleasure in everything, can you talk a bit on pleasure in relation to feeling anger? So this is how I experience this. The mind has labeled certain emotions as good or bad. An emotion, an experience of anger is, if you take away that label and all the meaning the mind has given to it and all the memories it has of bad things happening when we're angry or someone else is angry at us, and you strip away the experience of anger in your body, you strip away all those meanings from it, and you just tap into the pure experience of anger in your body, you'll notice that they are not so far away from each other, all these emotions. The emotions of excitement, the emotion of joy, of happiness, even the emotion of shame. It's like a hot rush, like in your body. Kind of takes you over and warms up your whole face. And when you start stripping away the meaning that the mind has given and just tune into the experience itself, they're quite similar. A rush of excitement, of happiness, a rush of anger, a rush of shame. So the more you step outside of the program of the mind and the identification with the mind and start to take these things apart and start seeing, that's the meaning from the mind. This is the experience in the body. This is the emotional response and the emotional sensation. I start to feel the difference between them. Now, when just tapping into the bodily experience of anger, yeah, it can be very similar to feeling pleasure or turn on or excitement. And this is when you can tap into the pleasure of anger, of a wave of anger. That's one side of it. And then there are parts in our unconscious, and these are the ones that have been pushed away really, really far down. It's the ones that loves being angry. It loves the feeling of being angry. It finds enjoyment in it. It was us as a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old where we had the tantrum. We start throwing things around, and it felt good. It felt good doing that. But we were told, no, that's not good behavior. That's not what you do. Go to your room, or you are a bad person if you act out this emotion, which is the biggest often contraction for us. Like, I shouldn't be a bad person. If I'm a bad person, I lose safety and security of my caretaker's attention and care for me. That means I'm not going to survive. I'm going to die. Danger. Let's keep this in check. So this is why our survival, the programs that keeps us safe will suppress these bad parts of us that actually enjoys and that finds pleasure in being angry or even punching another kid or hurting someone or causing suffering, because this all exists out there and it exists in parts of us. And when you also can tap into the pleasure that this part originally had in feeling this anger, and you can allow it to have a fulfillment in having the experience of pleasure with it, it will come like to a conclusion for it. Instead of being shamed and pushed down, it can my experience is allowed. It doesn't mean that we're going to throw things at people. It doesn't mean that we're going to hurt people, but the experience, the emotion of enjoying it, the emotion of feeling it in your body, the emotion of like feeling the anger and actually enjoying that. It's not about the action itself. It's about the emotion that's been repressed. Because yes, we still need boundaries of how we're treating other people, how we're treating ourselves, but it's the emotions. So that's an important distinction to make. So Janine, that's a little bit about pleasure in relation to anger. So I'm going to do one last question here before we end for today. Dennis is asking, can you talk a bit more how to exactly connect with pleasure in everyday life? Some exercises maybe. Yeah, I would say at the simplest level is about putting your attention there. Just with everything else you're doing in the self-mastery work, it's like, what happens when I put my attention on experiencing pleasure? Being curious about it, investigating it, doing some research. Like, okay, when are moments where I do feel pleasure? And do I have belief that that's the only time I can feel pleasure? So in that way, you're opening up to experience more of it. So putting your attention there and just notice what pleasure feels like in your body. And notice when it shows up and if it has attachments to external things or certain situations. Because inventorying that program and seeing how you've been relating to pleasure before, or how that program has been relating to pleasure, is a really good, first step. And then another thing is to tap into it in the most accessible way there is, like we did with the breathing, for example. Can you sense pleasure with your breathing? That's a way of start expanding it out from these external things that it's been attached to, that the program has been attached to with pleasure, and instead start feeling it in the simplest ways. So even if it's drawing 3 conscious breaths where you tune into the feeling of pleasure, the sensation of pleasure, and it might not be there in the beginning. Again, it's you practicing, it's you strengthening that skill, strengthening that muscle. So it will take some time. This is also something that we practice a lot. This is one of the focuses in Being Me. So if you're curious about practicing that more and want guidance on it, we do it extensively in there. It's one of the main pillars. So if you're curious about that, and if you're thinking about joining, but maybe be on the fence, I'm going to set up an event this weekend with a little Q&A if you want to come on and ask questions about what that mastermind experience is and what will be in there. And if your mind has doubts or wondering if that's right for you right now, then you're very welcome to join that. I will post that in the community shortly. Okay. We'll wrap it up here. Thank you, all of you. And this is one of the things that's really will take some time to connect with, because again, the mind, like I said, it's a linchpin. The mind has a lot of beliefs around it. But if you want to have one practice that will start having the house of cards kind of fall apart a little bit everywhere, and you're up for, and you have the motivation and attention to start observing all those programs surfacing, then this can be a really, really powerful one. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week again, if not sooner. Take care. Bye.